We have a great turnout again. We have such a variety of people. And as Barney mentioned before, I've been involved in the criminal justice, juvenile justice arena in the legislature ever since I've been there when I was elected in 2010. Many of you may know or don't know that I spent a good portion of my career as a law enforcement officer, 20 years of it right here in Sarasota County with the Sheriff's Department. I know Tom Knight, our sheriff, was here a few minutes ago. I think he has another obligation, but if you get a chance to speak with him, please do so. They've got some great things going on. I took a tour of the jail the other day, and some of the programs they have going on there are absolutely fantastic. So this morning, we're going to you know, this always happens. You use an iPad and somebody wants to give you an ad when you're ready to say something. So stand by. So anyway, as I'm pulling up the introductions, I want to let you know that the first bill that I ever passed was the juvenile civil citation bill. So I get to Tallahassee, here I am a freshman, and they say, hey, well, you're on the Criminal Justice Committee. And then Secretary Wansley Walters came to me and said, well, we got a good bill for you. Little did I know that it would be a little controversial to begin with, but it's been a long time now since we've had it. I think you're going to hear today some great results on what we've done or what the department has done and what's being done around the state in this program, which I think is absolutely one of the best programs that we've initiated for juveniles with the object to keep them out of adult prisons. As we moved on in that arena, we did pass the revision of the entire juvenile justice statute with the help of many of my friends here, Representative Baxley and others, and Gail Harrow, which in essence moved the concept of the statutes of Florida to emphasize prevention, intervention, and diversion. Have we heard those words before today or in the last couple of days? Well, it's very important for juveniles for the same reason, because we don't want them to be ending up in the adult prison where we still have issues that we're dealing with today after the fact. So we don't want them in reentry programs. We want them never to be in those programs. So this morning we're going to hear from a distinguished panel, and I'm very happy to be able to moderate this morning with these folks. And we'll start off with some introductions. And immediately to my left is Theda Roberts. She is the Civil Citation Coordinator for the Florida Department of Juvenile Justice. On the far end, we have a counterpart from Juvenile Justice, DJJ. We have the most, I would say about this man, if you want to know numbers, facts, and figures, he's got them for everything you want to know about juvenile justice, because he's been tasked with to make sure that these things work, and when they work, they really work. So, you know, it's great to have you here, but, you know, when we get into those numbers, you know, slow down a little bit on you.
Yes, sir.
Lieutenant Tom Enos and I go way back. We worked together at the Sheriff's Department for many years. He's been involved school resource officer program for many, many years. And he's currently the president of the Florida Association of School Resource Officers. And we're proud that he is, and proud that he's a member of our department here. And last but not least, Dewey Carruthers is the president of Dewey and Associates in St. Petersburg. He's going to have some very interesting things to tell us. So let's start right off with Ms. Roberts and let her give us a little update on what's going on with juvenile citations. And we've got one mic to share here. So.
Yes, sir. Well, it's been 4 years since we started on this journey to reform the way that we serve kids in the Department of Juvenile Justice, to build the best chance of success into them. And the cornerstone of that is the legislation that Representative Pallon so graciously shepherded through the process in 2011. Since that time, we have seen over 3,000 youth avoid arrest, but yet be held accountable for what they have done in ways that make their outcomes better. And that's an exciting piece of news, not only here in the state, but we're getting a lot of attention nationally as well. When we talk about civil citation, what we did in 2011 through this bill was to strengthen it in very significant ways. It requires a civil citation or similar diversion program in every community. It requires that every youth get an assessment, and that was one of the key pieces and has built to the success of the program. We look at every youth and we look at them individually to see what's going on in their life, what their risk factors are, what we can put in place to keep them from coming back again. And it also requires that up to 50 hours for every youth must be worked, and it requires some sanctions as well. Civil citation is community-based, which is another key to its success. The community owns its youth and takes responsibility for helping get them back on the right track. What is another key piece is that youth who do not successfully complete, if law enforcement has given them the opportunity for a non-criminal sanction for a criminal offense and they choose not to take advantage of that, then the original arrest goes through as if the civil citation had not happened. So there's definite accountability as we move forward. The civil citation process starts with the law enforcement who has the discretion whether to cite or to arrest, goes then to the community organization that operates where they do that assessment, where they make the interventions, where they assign the sanctions. And if that youth is success, there is no criminal history record to keep them out of colleges, out of the military, out of vocations. And that is one of the key pieces of success for these youth. And I get calls consistently from kids around the state who are saying, I'm trying to get in the military, I'm trying to do this, and we work hard to make that happen. It is interesting, though, before 2011, those kids' data was entered into the Juvenile Justice Information System, and those youth have a criminal history record, but since 2011, none of those youth do. We are data-driven. We have a dashboard that shows communities exactly what's going on there, how many civil citations are in the school, what law enforcement agencies are doing, and what the dispositions of the arrested youth look like. And when we're talking about dispositions, we're talking about eligible youth, eligible for civil citation. Of those youth who are eligible and arrested, 2/3 of those youth go into a diversion program. What's the difference between civil citation and diversion? Very little. There's an arrest, and there is twice the recidivism. If a youth is eligible for civil citation, the best option is to go to civil citation rather than the arrest process. It's been a journey as we move along. We're at 43% serving youth around the state, and I expect that we're going to move very quickly to build that number. Thank you.
Very good. And I neglected, I was talking about this great guy with all the figures, and I forgot to tell you it's Mark Greenwald. But Mark, you want to chime in on on your portion of it from DJJ?
Sure, and I have PowerPoint. Hopefully they can queue up here. One of the things I wanted to do today was to give everyone a breakdown of what delinquency is looking like in Florida in terms of civil citation use, the effectiveness of civil citation, and then give you some examples of some of the research we're doing to really dig into the effectiveness of these programs. Is it working? Is it working as intended, or do we have some unintended consequences? And so the first slide that I have here shows that I think Sheriff Esslinger mentioned it in his opening comments the other day, is that crime rates are at multi-decade lows, and arrests for juveniles are at multi-decade lows. And so even though the number of arrests coming into the Florida Department of Juvenile Justice have declined, we've seen an increase in the use of civil citations, which is good. And so one of the things you can see from this chart is that when we first started really tracking this statewide back in 2011, approximately 26% of the kids that we deemed as meeting statutory criteria to be eligible for civil citation were actually receiving a civil citation. And you can see that's progressively increased year over year, where last year, fiscal year 14-15, we have the highest percentage to date, which was 43%. So 43% of the kids that are eligible for a civil citation today are actually receiving a civil citation. This chart is not showing the actual number. I apologize, I'm not sure why that is, but this chart shows the physical number of civil citations that have been issued in Florida. So last year, we had 75,066 arrests in Florida. That's across the continuum from Key West to Pensacola, misdemeanors and felonies. And so back in 2010 and 11, we had approximately 4,400 cases that received a civil citation. During 2014-15, the number was just over 11,000. I apologize, I use a Macintosh, and so I imagine that's probably why it's causing problems for the slide. But we had just over 11,000 civil citations issued. And one of the things that you can see if you really unpack this data is you can go in and look community by community, and you can see pairwise reductions in that the number of misdemeanor arrests being filed and an increase in the number of civil citations that have been issued. So as one goes down, the other one goes up in some communities in Florida. Am I speaking too fast? I know I really speak too fast sometimes. Okay. One of the other things that we want to look at in juvenile justice is racial and ethnic disparities. You know, something that's been omnipresent in juvenile justice and criminal justice system is the idea of racial and ethnic disparities, where minority youth are overrepresented in the system comparative to their populations in the community. And so one of the things that we really like about the civil citation process is it's one of the bright lights in the delinquency system where we see some equality, where minority youth are just as likely to receive a civil citation as their white and Hispanic counterparts. And so what this chart shows, I know it's a lot of colors, a lot going on there, but what it's showing is that as the number of youth receiving civil citations has increased, the eligibility has increased over time, we see that the eligibility for minority youth has increased just like everyone else. And so black youth today are just as likely to receive it as they were back in 2012, 2011. So that's good news. This chart shows a breakdown of the highest rates of eligibility and use for civil citation across the state's 20 judicial circuits. And before I kind of go into this chart, there's a couple things I should mention. The civil citations currently are tracked by the Department of Juvenile Justice in the Prevention Web System. So statute says that if a civil citation is issued or something similar, we track it in our Prevention Web System to ensure that kids aren't getting multiple bites at the apple, so that someone in Sarasota knows that a child has an opportunity in Leon County and other areas. And so the vast majority of entities throughout the state use the Prevention Web System to record civil citations. There are a handful, I think we're down to around 2 or 3, that do not put their civil citations in the information system. And so if it's not in our information system, I can't report on it. So keep that in mind. Just because you see some of the percentages here as being lower, it does not necessarily mean they're not doing some type of an alternative to arrest program, first time offender program, civil citation. We don't really care what you call it. It's the alternative program. It just means I just don't have some of the data for that. But one of the things you can see from this chart is that when you consider 43% of eligible youth receive it, there's some pretty big discrepancies from one circuit to another. So one circuit that's been using civil citation for well over a decade now is Miami-Dade. And so looking at some of the numbers last year, 91% of the eligible youth with a first-time misdemeanor offense received a civil citation. And you can see numbers for different circuits around the state. My home circuit, Circuit 2, is at 56%, which is up a little bit and is above the statewide average. And we have some circuits that are below that average. And so this gives you an idea of how much it's being used around the state. If you go to our website, I'm a big believer in what gets measured gets done. I'm not paid to make the agency look good. I'm paid to put out numbers that show how we're doing and how the delinquency system works. And so if you go to the department's website, and I hope you do, we have an enormous amount of data information on the web. And you can look at civil citations by county, by circuit, by law enforcement entity. You can look at trends over time to see how things are working in your particular jurisdiction. And so one of the questions that we get asked is what happens to the kids who are ultimately arrested, who are eligible for civil citation but didn't actually get a civil citation? And so looking at some of the latest data we have available, we did a 12-month run between October 2014 and September 2015. We looked at just over 11,000 kids who were eligible, and we found the vast majority of those kids ended up going to diversion. Most got the same things they would have gotten had they received a civil citation. The difference is that they have an arrest record compared to those civil citation youth. The next largest group were cases that were dropped or null pros for one reason or another. And then you have a very small number, less than 4%, being put on some type of community supervision, probation. And we had a very, very small number actually went to one of our residential commitment programs. There's only 12 youth that went to one of our commitment programs from that pool. And so the majority of these kids are getting diversion anyways. They're getting some of the same services. So I'm going to share with you some of the latest recidivism data. We have not formally published this yet, so we thought we'd go ahead and announce it here. But every year we look at the recidivism rates for kids participating in civil citation programs. And so this chart shows the rates going back to 2009-10. In 2009-10, the rate was 7%. And in Florida, we call recidivism an adjudication withheld, or an adult conviction for an offense committed within 12 months of completing the program. And so you can see as the years have moved on, we had gone down to 4%, and now we're hovering right at 5%. So 95% of the kids that complete the civil citation process are not receiving a new adjudication withheld, or an adult conviction within 12 months of completing that program, which is very promising and very successful. It actually is one of the most effective interventions that we have, and that's even controlling for prevention programs in our system that they're dealing primarily with kids who have not had contact with the delinquency system. So another thing I wanted to show you is that in addition to being the Director of Research for the Department of Juvenile Justice, I'm also a full-time doctoral student at Florida State University's College of Criminology and Criminal Justice. So as you can imagine, I have a profoundly active personal life because of all that work. I study this stuff nonstop. And so one of the things that we did at the American Society of Criminology this year was present some research that I've been working on with some folks at FSU in my doctoral student role, looking at the potential net widening effects. And so what net widening is it's looking at the potential that you bring more kids into the juvenile justice system because of diversion programs than otherwise would have come into the delinquency system. And so an example I like to give is, when I was in high school, Deputy Doug, who was a member of the Lee County Sheriff's Office, found me drinking a fermented beverage underneath the stands at a football game. And he did the absolute worst thing you can do with a student in that situation. He made me do this. And that was the extent of it. He didn't want to arrest me. He just let me go. Other kids may need that civil citation or something like that, but what you don't want alternative to arrest programs being alternatives to release programs. Rather than just releasing a kid you would have released otherwise, you're now giving them a citation. You're technically widening the net. And so we wanted to study that. And so I don't have enough time to go through all of the research into this, but I'm going to show you a few slides and I'm going to explain what these mean, I promise. One of the things we did is what's called a time series analysis. And the easiest way to explain that is you're looking at what's happened in the past and you're using math to see what you think would happen in the future, controlling for a few other factors in the system. And so what we looked at was the time series of what diversions looked like in the state. We know that arrests have gone down, right? And so we would expect that diversions would have gone down. The line in this chart shows the breaking point when civil citations were dramatically expanded in Florida. And see, what you see there is an acceleration in the reduction of diversion cases in Florida. So the kids formally being processed in a diversion program. The next chart shows the number of kids actually receiving a civil citation in Florida. And so you can see an increase there that started a little bit before the law went into effect, when people started talking about it more, when Secretary Walter started with the agency, and then it accelerated after the implementation of the law. And the third chart shows the overall reduction in the number of first-time offenders that are presented to the department. And so we've seen fairly marked reduction in the number of first-time offenders and even second-time offenders coming into the department, which is one of the reasons why our delinquency numbers are as low as they are. And so what all these charts mean is essentially this, is controlling for other factors in the delinquency system. We saw that there was a significant decrease in the number of kids getting a diversion, okay? When you control for how many kids are coming in diversions, there actually wasn't a statistically significant increase in civil citations, but there was a significant decrease in the number of first-time offenders. And so when you apply all the math to this, what it translates into is we're not seeing a net widening effect, which is good news because you don't want to see that. And so this is the first research of its kind that's really that's looked at these kinds of relationships, and whether or not we're generating a net widening effect by having these kinds of programs. Someone earlier mentioned the NAACP and some others. There were some very serious concerns about whether we would be pulling too many kids into the system by having these kinds of programs. And right now, we're just not seeing any evidence of that. And so, finally, some of the things that we're working on at DJJ and with the folks at FSU is looking at county-level differences. Most of the numbers that I show you are statewide numbers, so you can get a feel for how things are going statewide. But there are some differences by counties or circuits. You can see what we call jurisdictional differences in certain parts of the state, North Florida versus South Florida, things like that. We're also looking at ways we can do some comparisons of the kids that are getting civil citation compared to the kids that are getting diversions. Are those equal groups? Are there something different about those kids that are getting diversion compared to their civil citation counterparts? And then finally, digging into some of the cost effectiveness of these programs, which is tricky business, digging into the differences between cost savings and cost and time avoidance. Things, for example, an example of a cost avoidance would be if you have a civil citation process that makes it easier for an officer to cite a youth and then get back in service, which is what most officers want. They don't want to be babysitting kids at an assessment center or an on-call screening. Trying to put some numbers that give us a feel for what kind of an impact it's having on the system. And so those are some of the things we're going to be doing in the future. How was that? Not too fast? All right.
I told you he had all the numbers, didn't I? And I encourage you all to go to their site anytime to see how this stuff is working and the hard work that DJJ is doing. And Mark is a yeoman for being 24/7 with this stuff, but we really appreciate it. I'd like to go to Lieutenant Enos now and ask him, as the president of the School Resource Officers Association and as a resource officer here in Sarasota, and see what they're up to and how this all is affecting them. Tim?
Good morning, everybody. I'm glad that the weather is so cool today that we can all enjoy ourselves. In December here, I think it's going to be 85 again. But anyway, I am the president of the Florida Association of School Resource Officers. I've been involved for 15 years. I've been in the youth services section with the Sheriff's Office in Sarasota County since 2001, almost 15 years also. I've seen a lot of different changes that we've had with juveniles across the state. The one thing that I do know is that whether you're a kid in Tallahassee or Sarasota or Miami, wherever you are, some of the cultural things will change, but pretty much kids are kids are kids. And what I kind of want to talk about is what does the Florida Association do in reference to the state of Florida, what we can do, what we're trying to accomplish. I know that things have come up in reference to our trainings. What do we do at the conference? What do we do as an association? And what are SROs doing on campus? So I also have a PowerPoint that I'll try to go through, and I'll be brief. One of the things is the association is we try to do the most advanced and comprehensive training in regards to school policing of anywhere in the country. We are the oldest organization. It was founded in 1979. We have over 600 members, and this past year we had the National Association that partnered with us, and we had the largest school policing conference ever held, which was in Orlando with over 1,300 SROs there. It was a great turnout, lots of good training, and what we can see is Florida leads the way in regards to SRO training in the entire country. Part of what we do is it's got law enforcement officers, it's got police officers, it's got school administrators, it's got school and safety personnel from all the different districts of Florida. Some of the things that we do is our number one priority of an SRO on your campus should be the safety of the staff and the parents and also of the faculty. When the students get there, they should be safe in their day. The faculty should be safe during their day, that we're ultimately law enforcement officers on campus. And I can tell you from talking to most SROs is that we have SROs that'll be in their position from 15, 20, 22, 25 years because they just have a love of kids and they want to make a difference. Because we are truly crime prevention at its finest, and that we can intervene in these kids' lives. And a lot of the stuff that they may not be able to get, that we can make referrals. So the other thing we also do is we try to establish the trust there so that when these kids have some terrible, terrible things that happen to them at their homes or in their community, that we a lot of times are going to be the first people that they come to because they trust to be able to tell us what's going on. So your SROs, we hope that they have an open door policy so that while they're on campus that they have that trust. We're not a school disciplinarian. If you look at some of the headlines in regards to law enforcement around the country in reference to involved in school discipline behaviors, we're not to be involved in school discipline. We're there as a council, as a resource for these kids, that we're not necessarily there whether or not they want to take their hat off or stop chewing gum or whatever they're there. We're there for the bigger picture of things. We also should do safety assessments, especially you look at the time of the day of everything out there. We talk to our members about doing school safety assessments, doing CPTED studies at their campus to try to, again, make everybody, as that's our priority, about safety of everyone. Community referrals, one of the things that we preach, and I can tell you from talking to people, is the mental health aspect of our children, the amount of stress that they're under now due to social media, due to just the Common Core training values that have changed, all these different things within Florida, is that we really need to have a good referral base that of a kids in crisis that we know where they can turn to in different programs in your community, because mental health is a huge concern. If you look, that's always on the top shelf for all of our guys, is that we want to make sure that the kids are getting the appropriate services. Mentors and role models, we are out there. A lot of our guys and ladies are professionals, and that they're out of the community. You know, the Shop with the Cops that is taking place right now, as well as coaches being involved as community members, partnerships, trainings, and also as a law enforcement resource. The philosophy of the SRO program has always been the same. It's the officer-friendly concept that's been around forever, since the 70s, which is to develop a relationship of trust, that somebody, that they can see the uniform and respect it, but that they can look past that, and that those are the guys that are going to help them, whether it's they need a bicycle helmet because their parents can't afford one, or whether they just need some intervention because of a terrible crisis that's happened. We focus on the function on the triad concept, which is teacher, counselor, and law enforcement, is that we talk to our SROs about getting into classes in order to talk, especially in high school. They want to know about when can they be searched, and can I do this, can I do that, what up with this, what's going on with this, and our guys and ladies, we want them to be able to go in there, and that's where they really get the relationships and bonding in the lunchrooms, walking around, be visible, deterrent on campus, and of course as a law enforcement officer when it's need. We have a lot of partnerships with FASRO. These are just some that we have every year at our training that we have. We have a 1-week training. This is our 37th annual. You can see there that we also run with the Attorney General's office, that they do a basic SRO class. Department of DJJ, we have them come every year, and we talk about things that are going on out in the community. Florida Department of Law Enforcement, we sit on the MPEC for the state of Florida for the missing persons. The Florida Sheriff's Association, we have a great partnership with them, the School Safety Advocacy Council, the National Association. Some of the things that are coming up, we always have critical incident response, bullying, autism, all these different things. Social media is huge, huge, huge for your SROs on campus. The kids don't have any filters. They post everything on there, from probably the #1 picture you see in middle and high school is them smoking weed. That's like the big popular thing, is to show yourself smoking weed. They post those things. They don't understand that the effects of that coming down the road, the picture is really never ever gone. And as they go through the screening process in employments, colleges, and a lot of other things, that they don't really get that. So this year we're focusing a lot on the whole social media aspect and in investigations. Agency of the Years, we always recognize an agency. Last year was the Collier County Sheriff's Office, in reference to increasing the professionalism of school policing. They do an excellent job in just being involved in their community and all of the different programs that Collier County is involved in. We also recognize, a little hard to read, Officer of the Year, which is between the Attorney General and FASRO. Last year was Wade Walcott from Plantation down in Miami. And we also do educational scholarships. We give out 4 $1,000 scholarships every year at the conference to high school seniors for them to go to college. Pretty much on the campus, as they should be visible, they should be out there, they should be accessible, and like I said, they should be the person that's guarding our kids every day, so that when they show up at campus, that they can feel safe.
Thank you, Lieutenant. Last, but certainly not least, we are fortunate to have Dewey Carruthers, the president of Dewey and Associates, here. He had a PowerPoint, and Barney lost it. So blame Barney. But he says he can go through it. So Dewey, thank you very much, and it's all yours.
Absolutely. Good morning. I have worked with civil citations for about 6 or 7 years. Helped start and grow civil citation programs in various counties. But I'm here this morning to talk to you about a study that I authored and released over the summer. It's called Stepping Up, Florida's Top Civil Citation Efforts. And the purpose of the study was to advocate for the importance of civil citations while recognizing those that do it best. So what I did is I went and looked at all of the different law enforcement agencies, school districts, and counties, evaluated how effective they are in terms of civil citation, and I ranked them. Those folks who are doing a great job with civil citation can get some recognition. The study, and by the way, a key partner in the study was the Children's Campaign, and the work was supported by Southern Poverty Law Center, James Madison Institute, the Clark Family Foundation, and Florida State University Project on Accountable Justice. We all came together for this study because we feel very strongly that civil citation, the utilization rates need to be increased sooner rather than later, much more rapidly than what they are currently being increased. The study had 3 key findings. The key finding number 1 was that civil citations increase public safety. And the increased public safety, just to follow up on some numbers that Mark mentioned, the recidivism rate for a civil citation is 5%. The recidivism rate for a post-arrest diversion is 13%. So you can see by issuing a civil citation, you're going to have less reoffenders out there on the street. So by making that arrest for a civil citation eligible offense, you're actually creating more reoffenders out there on the street. Now, let me take a moment and make a sidebar comment to make sure we're all on the same page and it bears being redundant. Civil citations are about common youth misbehavior only. Okay, these are not felonies, these are not serious crimes. These are things that many of us, most of us, probably did when we were young. Schoolyard fight without injury, smoking marijuana, but thank God there weren't cameras. These sorts of things, underage drinking. Now, it's important to also note that when I say we, I also mean my sponsor, not the panel here, but the folks who fund my work. We feel strongly that there should be a consequence to these things. These things are against the law. Nobody's arguing against that there be a consequence. The point is that the consequence needs to be appropriate. So back to the 3 key findings. The first finding, again, is that it increases public safety. Also, to follow up on what was previously said, law enforcement wants to be out there catching really bad guys. You know, they don't want to be babysitting youth. So that time that civil citation saves a lot of time for law enforcement, and they're able to get back out there. So that's another way that increases public safety. It improves youth opportunities just from an obvious perspective that these youth go on with an arrest record and they have to report it to college, technical training, credit card loans, housing loans. An arrest record can stay with the youth for well into adulthood and really impact the quality of the life that a youth wants to build. One of the things that when I speak about civil citations, a widespread misperception out there is folks will say, well, if they got arrested, it's not a big deal. They can just go get their records expunged. It's not nearly that simple. By any means is it nearly that simple. The Children's Campaign has done a tremendous job of trying to raise awareness about juvenile records expunction and how difficult it is. And particularly for low-income folks who don't know lawyers, it can be pretty much impossible. The other key finding is that the cost savings of civil citation. Using the most recent cost savings data, we're looking at for each civil citation issued instead of an arrest. For each issued is anywhere from $1,500 to $4,600 in savings for each issued. Now, that's a range. The reason that's a range is because we all know that if a youth is arrested for common youth misbehavior, chances are they're going to go into some sort of diversion program before you run throughout the entire prosecutorial process. So that represents a range. Now, what we did is in this study is we looked at what would Florida look like if civil citation utilization was increased by a modest 25%, just 25%. And what we came up with is we're looking at somewhere between a savings of 20 million and 60 million in 1 year, again going back to that range, and we're looking at a 40% reduction for common youth for arrests for common youth misbehavior. So you can see there's lots of benefits statewide and to the community by increasing that utilization by 25%. We also, in addition to the study, we put together a report for each county. Every county has a county report. I'll give you the address to go check this out in a minute. And what we did is we looked at what would your local community, what would your county look like if you increase civil citation by 25%? And we calculated the numbers for that county in terms of the cost savings and in terms of the percentage of reductions of youth arrests. And all of this information is at the Children's Campaign website. It's iamforkids.org. And I really encourage you to go take a look at what your county's doing with civil citation. These county reports can be an invaluable tool. I developed these for civil citation advocates on a local level to be able to take and show those detractors of a civil citation the benefits of civil citation to the community. We also looked, the last piece on the study, we also looked nationally. I was interested, I don't know if you know, but Florida is is really the nation's leader in civil citations. It's not always called civil citation in another state. It might be called pre-arrest diversion, or it might be called something else. So civil citation is a catch-all phrase that I'm using. But Florida really leads the nation in civil citations. We looked at a couple areas in our national research. We looked at all of the state statutes and said, okay, who's got the best state statutes? Then we looked at all of the states' data reporting, because to Mark's earlier point, what gets measured gets done. If you're not measuring anything related, if there's no data on civil citation, if you're not measuring anything related to it, then you can't really do anything about it. Florida came up as in the top, among the top strength in terms of data reporting. Just to let you know, I could not have done this study had the civil citation dashboard not been developed by DJJ. Many states don't have, they don't have anything like a dashboard, but they don't have anything. So I've gotten a call from folks saying, we'd love for you to come do a similar study in our state. And my point is, but you got no data. You're not keeping track of anything. It's going to be very difficult. It's going to be a very short report. And then Florida also ranked among the top in the nation in terms of state statutes. And I think with the recent legislation that was just passed that gives civil citation, that gives law enforcement the discretion to issue civil citation to the same youth up to 3 times, we're going to see Florida move at the very top in terms of state statutes. So it's important to note that while we are encouraging a modest increase of 25% utilization, statewide, Florida still leads the nation in doing it.
Thank you. Did I go off, guys? Okay, there we go. Let's give our panel a round of applause just for their presentations. Now, as you know, if you've ever participated in these things, they usually give me questions and let them know what all the questions are. Well, I'm noted for going off script, so don't expect anything different, but you've actually answered many of the questions that we've had. I'd like to drill down into a little bit about what Theda said in the beginning. With the civil citations, the youth comes in. First of all, we mentioned some of the offenses, but can you just give a brief summary of the general offenses that are allowable under misdemeanor citations?
Well, when I've asked Mark Greenwald how many offenses
We need a mic there.
Mark has answered that there's too many to list, so we've gone the opposite approach. We just tell you what we think are not eligible. Yeah. The statute says non-serious misdemeanor. Thank you, sir. And we consider a civil citation to be eligible except for those offenses that are firearm related, sexual related, gang related. And but we have a caveat even with those. Miami-Dade, one of the outstanding programs for civil citation, they serve 90% of every youth that comes into the door. Even they allow civil citation for those offenses on a case-by-case basis if it's in the best interest of the youth and the public. So we have general guidelines, and that's up to counties to determine what is eligible within their counties. Most counties go with our guidelines. We do have a few counties that have very limited eligibility.
Okay, thank you. We talked a little bit about when a youth comes in under a civil citation and they're assessed. And you mentioned the automatic 50 hours, which is okay. But please elaborate a little bit more, Theda, on what that assessment does, because we all know we're looking at such a variety of problems that a youth may have: family, mental health, substance abuse, all of those things that you deal with.
Right.
What do you do with them when you identify, just knowing that there are so many differences, I guess the question is what services, and I'm sure it's different in every circuit, would you place these people in?
Well, we have a mental health, substance abuse contract out in every county, so we know that that is eligible. Most counties have enough resources to handle these youth, even the small rural counties. In those small rural counties that lack few resources, DJJ does the civil citation, oversees the civil citation youth, does the assessment, makes sure they get to interventions. Those interventions could be the mental health we've talked about, as well as shoplifting, diversion type classes. The top 3 offenses that kids get into civil citation is for that: petty theft, battery charges, as well as misdemeanor marijuana charges. So all of those, we try to cover all of them. Obviously, the larger counties that are very robust, like Leon and Dade, have a wider range of interventions available.
Very good, and I think maybe the adult community we've heard a lot about at this conference so far, the fact that in the adult community, when we started decentralizing and decommissioning state hospitals and moving people into community treatment at the adult level, that the state outwardly funded those for many, many years. As memories lapsed and new legislators came along, things were kind of forgotten. Then we had a big recession and they were downturned. What effect, so we all know that we have to increase those resources, or at least I'm in favor of it. Can you elaborate? And Mark, you can jump into what the needs are I know you have contracts, but do we need more services? Do we need more contracts? What's your feeling on that? Mark?
Yeah, I can respond to that. It depends often where you live. And so, for example, in very dense, populous counties, you don't see as much of a need. One of the things the legislature asked us to do last year was to start doing what we call community service mapping. It's looking at all the different services that are available for youth in the delinquency system or an alternative to arrest program, and finding out, definitively what we do and don't have. And then going a little bit deeper, you can have, for example, substance abuse treatment, outpatient substance abuse treatment, but you might not have enough of it if you have a long waiting list and things like that. And so on our website, again, are some links to some guides where you can see by county the different types of resources that are available. And one of the things our agency learned, I can speak for DJJ, is we found some things that even our staff weren't aware of that were available. But you do see the biggest gaps, and it makes sense, in some of the very, very small counties. If you have a place like Lafayette County, if there's anybody here from Lafayette, sorry, but if you have 8 kids arrested in a year, you just don't have an economy of scale to have a whole lot of services in that county. And so we either have to bust the services in or bust the kids out to those services, which can be problematic. But we're doing an updated version of that report this year that is due to the legislature by December 31st. That will update that in more detail to really give a sense of what's needed in what county and what exists and what doesn't exist.
Okay,
And one
thank
thing
you.
to
Go
point
ahead,
out,
Dave.
if I may,
Yeah, sure.
is that these youth are very, very low-risk offenders. Most of them don't come to us with significant problems for which they need services.
Very good. Dewey, you mentioned, and as others did, the need to expand this program. What do you see are the roadblocks to expanding civil citation in Florida?
I think that there's some low-hanging fruit to get to this 25% increase in utilization. I don't think it's very difficult. I think training, law enforcement training, is one of the biggest issues. When I travel around the state, if I go out to dinner or something like that, or happy hour or whatever, and I run into a law enforcement officer, I usually go up and just say hello, start a conversation, and I'll ask that law enforcement officer, hey, what do you think of civil citation program? Are you issuing many civil citations? It's astonishing how many law enforcement officers don't even know what I'm talking about. So it's really difficult to have this expectation of law enforcement officers on the front line to issue civil citations when they don't even know what they are. I think training would go a long way. I think this 25% increase that brings this 40% reduction in youth arrests and the $20 to $60 million a year in savings that can easily be done with better training with law enforcement.
Okay, and I'd like to have DJJ follow up on that, either one of you or both of you. I know that you have limited resources, but you have been reaching out ever since we did this. What roadblocks are you seeing from within the DJJ itself to expand this program? Mark, you want to start?
I would say one of the roadblocks might be in the variety of offenses where it might be available. And so in Community A, if you recall the chart I showed where in Miami-Dade, 91% of eligible youth receive it, they're pretty serious about it there. There's actually a sign, I can't remember exactly what it says, but if you go to our assessment center, there's a sign when you walk in the Sally Port where the officer brings the youth in that says, you know, all jurisdictions in this area have agreed to use civil citation. Failure to issue one means we have to report that to your shift commander. I mean, they're hardcore about it down there. In other areas, you might see, you know, they start off small. They'll start off with things like petty theft, very, very minor offenses, but they're less likely to use it for things like maybe simple battery or misdemeanor marijuana possession and things like that. And so one of the things we've been looking at is if there's any substantive differences between kids charged with one misdemeanor versus another. You know, do kids that have a misdemeanor pot charge recidivate at a higher rate than kids that come in on a petty theft or a simple battery? And the early evidence is no, we're not seeing any fundamental differences between the two. But we're still looking at that to try and unpack and make sure that's actually the case everywhere in the state. But I would say it's what's included in the policy locally.
Okay, in other words, leadership of those agencies has a lot to do with it. Well, speaking of those agencies, what is the ratio of, or the difference between sheriff's offices using civil citation and local police departments? Do we have local police departments joining in as well as sheriff's offices? Theta, go ahead. Let Theta jump in here, Mark.
We do have many local police departments taking advantage of civil citation, and it depends. And by county, we have some counties where police officers are using it more, but primarily it's used more in the sheriff's offices. And that's probably because the school resources officers are attached to the sheriff's office in most locations, and we have a great deal of civil citations coming from that. If I could answer the first question. Sure. When I'm talking to law enforcement officers around the state, I perceive the biggest challenge to be that they believe that civil citation is soft on crime. And that's, we have to combat that. And the combat is that it's smart on crime. You're giving this kid a break. If they choose not to take advantage, the original arrest goes through. It's a good opportunity for both law enforcement and kid.
So it's a cultural issue. I mean, we can change policy and organization, but changing that culture, again, up to the individual department.
Yes,
well, Tim, Lieutenant, you've just recently joined the ranks of civil citations here in Sarasota County. Very proud of that, obviously. I don't know why it took so long when I passed the frigging bill, but, No, I worked with Tom Knight. It's too early to tell, Lieutenant, I know, of how it's going to work because it's just been indicated. But what are your aspirations, especially from the school resource officer side?
Well, one of the things that, in reference to Sarasota, one of the things when we talk about partnerships is that what goes on in here is that we have an excellent relationship with the state attorney's office, with the public defender's office, with the school district, with that whole group there that ultimately has to look for the best interests of the kids. So when we actually start talking about this, one of the things even past civil citation, when we look at this, is that it really comes back to the training, back to the SROs or the people that are in the schools. It also comes back to is that with our partnership, and I know that we were just, in the justice partnership world, looking at even limiting out-of-school suspensions in regard to we know the data is out there in reference to a lot of children have these traumas that go on in their lives between 3 to 7 years of age. They end up acting out. They have these things reference to this mental health issue that, ultimately we take it and we say, okay, well, the first thing we want to do is take the kid and suspend them out of school and put them out of school, and ultimately we need to be able to provide some kind of service for them in order for them to get past where they are so they don't become repeat offenders. So one of the things even in Sarasota that we're doing along with the civil citation is working with Judge Hayworth in our committee is trying to look at contracts in schools in reference to, instead of doing out-of-school suspensions, holding that process in lieu in order to get them into some type of services to ultimately prevent that recidivism just at the school level for like a petty theft where we could bring somebody in through DJJ, through somebody that can provide some kind of service or training to really to look into what is the underlying reason that maybe these things are happening, and not just automatically saying, okay, well, you're suspended, you're out of school for 5 days, now you go home, you're on social media, you're playing Xbox, PS4, you're doing all these things. Maybe you're out there doing other crimes because you're not being monitored because your parents have to work. So at least this point, when we look at it here in Sarasota, is that I think that we're very, very fortunate in that partnership that we have with all of the people that come to the table is looking for the best interest of the kid and trying to ultimately expand services, not just with the civil citation, but using civil citation in order to expand it, in order to ultimately provide services for the kids in our community.
Okay, great. And to follow up a little, first of all, you know, we all had the discussion about the upcoming adult civil citations, and if you didn't catch it, the difference from a law enforcement perspective is, yeah, we don't always have to, or I didn't either, but you don't have to arrest everybody for those minor crimes or have notice to appear. Well, it still puts them in the system, and the difference in this arena is that prior to civil citations, even if you had a diversion program, and I won't mention the one that's caused us the most problem, but because I like them, but that in order for them to take a youth into their program, a little box had to be checked at the bottom of the probable cause affidavit, which puts them into the system. So let me ask this question. With those types of programs, I'll just say it, it's teen court. I love teen court. But they created some very difficulties for me passing this bill originally, and we've been working with them. Sheriff Knight's been working with them here in Sarasota. This is for DJJ, if a youth receives a misdemeanor citation, can they be diverted, or would you divert any of them to teen court?
Absolutely. In fact, we have, the statute calls the organization that operates civil citation in each county an operating entity. We have 22 operating entities that are operated by teen court.
Yeah.
So it's definitely, and in fact, you know, this is a good time to point out that civil citation is not a standalone program. It's not designed to be. It's designed to be applied to whatever diversion program is already out there existing in the community by making a few tweaks.
Very good. So problem solved. Glad to hear that. We can all sing Kumbaya from now on. Let me go back, and this is a question for anybody that wants to answer it or anybody that wants to chime in. Years and years ago, and it was, I think, brought out first of all through the Indian circles, and then in Oregon, where we use the term, which you don't hear much today, restorative justice. Is there any plan to incorporate, as we move forward and do our studies and our numbers, to offer to victims, if they want, go face-to-face with these juveniles? For example, if somebody goes into 7-Eleven and steals a pack of gum or some cigarettes or whatever they do, would it be beneficial to have them meet face-to-face? Anybody want to tackle that?
I can. You're referring to restorative justice policies. When the restorative justice policies look at helping the youth, the offender, understand the harm that they're causing and then helping repair that harm. And so there already are some examples throughout the state where you have these kinds of circles where you can have school accountability boards, neighborhood accountability boards, where they bring youth and victims together to help them understand, to increase their empathy, understand that what you're doing actually has a victim, it has a harm, and it helps repair the victim. Because a lot of the times when you hear us talk about the different programs that we have, really almost all the research I have on our website, the victim isn't mentioned anywhere because the victim isn't part of the analysis in terms of what we do with the kid. And so this is one of the few areas where you can help get the victim some closure and help them understand, why we wanted to do pathway A with a kid versus pathway B. And so I would say the literature's, there's a pretty good body of literature on restorative justice, its effectiveness, and there's sporadic outbreaks of it appearing throughout the state. And then I know in department policies, we have restorative principles integrated into department policies. That's part of the agency's roadmap to strategic, I should know the name, I'm going to get in trouble now, our roadmap document. And it's part of policies to understand, increasing empathy and things like that.
Good, very good. Because an experience that I had years ago, excuse me, I actually was the supervisor of an explorer's post at the sheriff's office, which was, related to Boy Scouts of America, but girls were participating too. It's come a long ways. They still have that program. But one of the guys that took over long after I left had a big article in the newspaper. He went on to be a city commissioner, by the way, but Tim's looking at me. But anyway, they were so proud that the Explorer Post went out and was painting over the graffiti on buildings and underpasses. And my question to the advisor at that time is, why aren't you, if you identify or capture or bring into the system, and we didn't have civil citations then, the youth that were responsible for that, why aren't they doing it? Well, because there wasn't anything in effect to do that at that time. So we've come a long ways, and I think we're recognizing that. Years ago, Lieutenant, when I was a very young man, long time ago, at the Sheriff's Department under Sheriff Jim Hardcastle at the time, I was fortunate enough, being the adult crime prevention officer, and be involved in crime prevention, to be the recipient of a grant to study in England, in Devon and Cornwall, and teach at their academy. And my host there, which has become a longtime friend, was a school resource officer. And they had been involved in school resource for many, many years. At that time, it meant basically being in the classroom. So first question is, are you in the classrooms at all anymore, or is it strictly outside? And does Common Core in the curriculum, I'll put you on the spot, caused a problem?
Well, it's one of those things, it's kind of like, to try to get into the classes these days is a lot harder than it was, because we used to be able to, especially at the high school level, used to be able to get into Hope. And so as they've changed all the different curriculums in order to get in there, we still have an opportunity to go in to teach, but it is very, very limited because of the school districts on a specific schedule and a specific standard that they have to meet in reference to the Common Core objectives. We still are able to get in there, as we in the Sarasota, as we try to require our people to get in there to talk at least one time, because it comes back to the foundation, to teach at least one class period a month, as it comes back to the foundation of building relationships with kids, because we want them to be able to come up to us to tell us who's selling drugs, is there going to be any other kind of issue, or there's going to be a weapon, what is going on, so that no matter what ends up happening, is as we develop those relationships that they feel comfortable in talking to us. So a lot of that is when we go in there and we're able to teach. So we are able to get in there, but ultimately it comes back in regards to the training. Is one of the things is that there is no mandated training to be an SRO in the state of Florida. So we would like to, one of the things as an organization for FASRO is such a special, specific thing as being a school resource officer, especially with just some of the legalities of it. One of the big topics right now that's come out of the South Carolina incident is about de-escalation. When you go through the academy, I had a long conversation with our major. They teach you about escalating, be ready, be ready, be ready, be ready. And now you're talking to a kid that has a disciplinary problem that's not a criminal offense, and we come in there and we're ready because the staff is calling for us, and really what we need to be talking about is de-escalation, is what can we do in order to make the child to comply again, coming back to not getting them. So in reference to training, that would be something that I think that would benefit everywhere. Regional trainings, something out there that as different topics that affect our kids, which ultimately become our adults, if we could get out there to be able to make contact and to be able to give the latest in regard to civil citation or out-of-school suspensions or services or de-escalation techniques, that would be something I think that's needed.
Very good, and I think this brings up a great point of how this is a big wheel with a lot of spokes in it. We often forget about the education side of it in our schools, in our school systems, as well as what happens outside of the schools. And I think at the state level that you're seeing the Department of Education, DCF, DJJ, as we spoke about the collaboration efforts yesterday, are coming together. So that's all good news. I got one more question for you, Lieutenant. Then we'll get back to our other panelists very quickly before we open it up. Things have changed. Times have changed. From the days of just going into a classroom to now being a resource for what you've mentioned very eloquently. Talk to me about what your role now has become with the threat to our schools from terrorism or lone wolves.
Well, and that's our number one priority, as I stated, as any SRO, is that we are the person that's going to stand out in the front in order to try to make sure that everybody knows that you have to go through us in order to get to our kids. That has totally changed. We have to look at cameras. We have to look at fencing. We have to, the communities of the old past where we'd show up with 10 kids to play basketball back at Sunday afternoon. Unfortunately, a lot of those days have gone by, and that we have to be more forward-thinking due to what's going out there in the culture that we have. We have to look at cameras. We have to look at fencing. We have to look at signage. We have to look at training. We have to look at staff training, visitor IDs on campus to identify who is on there, being able to look at all of the different trends that are out there in reference to just narcotics and where can they be hidden. Should there be lockers on campus or no lockers on campus just because they might be able to come in after hours on the weekend and put drugs in there. So a lot of that stuff has changed, and in regard to just our role on campus is that we have to be vigilant and to make sure that everybody knows that they have to go and have one point of entry so that everyone gets screened is on record who's on campus. So that's a really big piece, which we have to be part of that administrative team that we work in conjunction with the district, and not just that we're out on the island by ourselves, that we're all there for the same thing, which is for the kids. But that role has totally changed in the last 15 years.
Well, let me bring it back to the topic of what we're talking about, and that's why I asked you about that. In dealing with civil citations and diversion programs and the counseling that you do in the schools, has this international and national threat that we have affected the behavior of the students that you see, or are they ambivalent about it?
No, I hear from middle school kids and even elementary school kids that when you see stuff that's happening, just like in the shooting it recently happened in San Bernardino, they are on top of those things, that they know that, and some of them are actually articulating that they're scared about coming because they don't know when the next shooting is going to be. And a lot of that has to be, is the biggest game changer is social media, is that the students can get that information immediately. They read it, they see it, whether they're 11 or 12 or 10 years old, so that they are tuned in with a lot of the things, because they're going to get the alerts on their phones. They're going to get to see those things, and they are definitely know what's going on out there. And then you hope that they're going to let the SROs know that if something is going to happen, that they're going to come forward.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that, and it's sad, but a truism of what we deal with today. I just hope. And the reason I ask that question, because I'm personally concerned about the fact of what the effect of all this is going to be on the behavior of our students in school and at home, and whether they will seek other outlets to relieve the stress. And that may be another good topic for somebody to study in the future. Well, we're going to open it up now to everybody. I know we're looking for lunch. I see a hand. The light's bright, but I see this hand back here. If you would grab, if there is a mic. If not, speak very loudly. Yeah, great comment, and I think there was a question in there, but the basis of that was, we've talked about what's happening in the world today in our education system. The teachers that are awfully burdened by a large number of issues, and the effect that that's having on us as a society. I don't know if the panel wants to weigh in on any of that. I think we understand what you're saying and we all realize it, and I'm glad that you spoke out and we're able to talk about it. Anybody else? Really? We've got that great, oh, there we go. Of course. Go ahead. Stand up. There we go.
Lieutenant, you mentioned that the most popular or the number one posting in social media for the kids was them smoking marijuana. So out of 100% of the kids, what percentage of the kids are actually posting pictures like that? And what age group are you talking about?
Well, what I would say is that if you from talking and being out and down the communities, is that's kind of the big choice that's going on. I was talking to one of our people from that does drug interventions here in Sarasota, and they said that the kid usually starts at about 8th grade is when they have their first drink. They're now seeing that in 8th grade, they're not having their first drink, they're smoking their first joint, because that's what's being out there from the media in reference to all these other issues, that it's okay, it's natural, it's we get it from all of the different celebrities that say it's okay and it's cool and you can't be addicted, it's not a gateway drug, and we know all of that from knowing individuals that is the case. So, where do you start seeing that stuff? I've seen as young as 11-year-olds drinking beer and posting it on Instagram, to 16, 17, 15, 14-year-olds smoking joints in their parents' car, and they post it on Instagram. Because one of the things with that is that educational piece on that social media is that the parents aren't necessarily monitoring what their kids are doing, and they're posting all of these pictures, and then there's an issue that happens, and of course you go back and you look, well, starting in 6th grade, this student has got 50 pictures of them drinking, and you wonder why now that they're having some kind of an issue. So it ranges, but I've seen as young as 11, and I've seen all the way through high school and of course college. And if you look at some of the new sites, like Yeti is a social media site for college kids. They're on there routinely with substance abuse, smoking, doing a lot of illicit hard drugs on there. They post the pictures on a rotator. Almost every university has one. So it's kind of like the in thing to do is to show that you're part of the in crowd because you smoke weed.
Yeah, and I think like with smoking cigarettes and things like that, I think a lot of the peer pressure is going to have to be used to turn that around. Any other questions? Yes, Colleen?
What I might do is actually pass the buck to Theta, it spends really more time on the ground throughout the state, finding out what the challenges are in small counties. It can be something as simple as paperwork. We've had counties where it just physically took more paperwork to issue a civil citation than a normal arrest, which just didn't make any sense. And so we worked with them on those things. But Theta, do you want to chime in?
Well, unfortunately, it's not just small counties where we're having poor utilization. What we are doing as a state is to meet with each of the statutory stakeholders, each head of each law enforcement agency, state attorney, public defender, and chief circuit judge, just to explain the process, get them on board, and then start having joint meetings to hash out any glitches, any misconceptions, to get a process in place. So that's a procedure that we use to get people on board. It is always valuable to have community groups, community leaders on board as well. That has made the difference in some counties getting on board. I can tell you that two of our smaller counties that serve sometimes 100%, they might not have a lot of kids, but they serve them all, is Baker County and Union County, and they operate under their local teen court. So those opportunities are out there. I don't believe there's that many challenges as far as just getting it accepted within each agency.
Well, thank you very much, and we're running up against lunch hour. I just have a quick question. How many people here think that juvenile misdemeanor citations is a good idea? Anybody brave enough to say that it's not? Good.
Well, you can talk to me later.
Well, let me issue a challenge to you then, based on Colleen's last question and the answer here. Those of you that are involved in your communities, either as service providers, in law enforcement, in the criminal justice system, and us and legislators, the way we can make this more successful is for you to get involved. And I'm sure you have other questions for them, and if you want to be involved, I encourage you during the lunch break or any other time to get with them personally. Because this obviously is a huge issue for me, and I continue to champion it. So let's give our panel a great round of applause.